Oh, greetings. Here I am, looking like a terrified street hobo. Webcam audio seems to be working. Yep, I do that to see. Oh, I'm not even wearing. Usually I'm wearing headphones and I'm trying to find out what microphone it's on, but it could only be that one. So that finger clicking was pointless. Yes, everything seems good. Greetings and welcome. This is yet another video stream thingamajig on this wonderful and somewhat stationary project to do some cool stuff with a hypercube thing, which currently sort of works, but is also woefully incomplete. So that's a thing. That's how far we got. Last time, it was a few days ago. I've been a bit busy with other stuff. What did we implement last time? I say we, I did all the hard work. Oh yeah, it put everything into a big old bucket of vertices in a kind of a messy way. This is largely just test code, so it needs to kind of be rejigged so that everything makes sense. And that's what I'm going to take a stab at today. But all of this rendering stuff is pretty complicated, and I don't have a really good idea mapped out of how it's all going to work, other than it has to fulfill certain criteria, and that's difficult to just sort of type in. As always, I'm taking the song requests. If you have a song you want to hear, maybe I can play it. Probably not, though. Cool. So all of this kind of apparently worked, but there was no real proof that it actually worked. It seemed to, though, or it filled a bunch of vertices in, and that was fun. Yo, an invoice in the middle of the night, unbelievable. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I've made this draw manager class. As you can see, it's extremely well fleshed out in that it's got at least something public maybe at some point. So far that class is beautiful. And what I want to do is, there's a class here to render individual rooms. So each of these 8 rooms on the hypercube has its own render function, which puts it into the right holonomy preserving orientation. As you can see, for example, that box thing up there can be in a different orientation depending on how you're looking at the room. Or if you go down, it's down there. So the whole room's getting flipped into different orientations. So that's fine. That's all handled, or not kind of handled, but this happens here. But this whole render room thing is sort of silly because it does way too much stuff with OpenGL. Really, it should just build a mesh, handle the mesh and textures, or it shouldn't even handle the textures, but it should just issue draw commands for both the room's mesh and the objects inside the room, which shouldn't be too hard. So what I'm going to do is give it, in the room render options thinger, I'm going to give it a draw manager pointer. Oh yeah. Cool. Then I guess the rendering engine should have a draw manager. I guess I could like make a debug one or something if I wanted, but that's not really what I'm exactly going for. let's just put this stuff. I'm going to put a comment here. This stuff is kind of nonsense. Okay, so we're draw manager. It's just going to be a draw manager. I guess I could instantiate one, use all sorts of virtual functions and fun stuff like that to make it behave differently in different methods, in different ways. That definitely could be fun. For now, it's just gonna... Well, there's a sort of rumbling in the sky. I'm sure it's fine. It'll just be the moon exploding or something. Okay, cool. We've got a draw manager, and now we're going to render some rooms. And the first thing we're going to do is say the draw manager is going to be our draw manager. Bash, bosh. We have that. Now let's look at that render room. So let's pretend it doesn't do any of this stuff. There, it doesn't do any of it. It's an empty function. Well, I could take this out, but I kind of want it to still do that because if I take it out, then I'll just get nothing rendered, and that's not useful. I'll take it out at the moment when I've got it sorted to do it in a different way. So it's like options, draw manager, strat. Here's your strategy. Did I take note? I think I took notes on this somewhere, but I did not open them before I started the stream. So excuse me for one moment while I just wait for it to load. I wanted to start the rendering stuff. At the moment there's only one shader, so that's cool. Let's whoa, public init function and a start function. Okay, cool. Now, this program, this so-called program, could go here. In reality, it should probably have a bunch of programs or something. It doesn't actually know what a program is. A program is just a little wrapper class I've made that calls the gen and delete functions in OpenGL for its different types. It's extremely thin wrapper. For programs, I don't think it even initializes it, it just deletes it. Okay, there is no CPP file for this, so let's touch source render draw manager.cpp. We've already got edit files, let's just fill it in ourselves. Okay, boom, there we've got it. Okay, cool, we've got that, and we need to fill out these functions. Now that vertex thing, I am not sure that should go there. I almost feel like there should be a description of different shaders and the vertices and something in some big data file somewhere. But for now I've just dumped it there because that's a place, and the place is as good as any other place. Initialization, let's have a look at what the initialization could be. So that's all this stuff. For now, I'm doing that. And these uniforms as well. I'm gonna grab the uniforms, so you'll know about the uniforms. I guess, I don't know where I'm going with that. Sure, why not? Okay, so if start is just gonna use the program, I guess. Yeah, I feel like this definitely already needs to be refactored because I feel like the room should just issue a series of commands and it should start and stop the programs whenever it needs to, which is, yeah, whatever, we'll get to that. So this vertex array so there needs to be the vertex array set up for that. My brain is failing here, but this is the bit that's really doing my head in. So maybe if I just talk through what I'm trying to do, it will somehow start making sense. So the rendering engine is going to deal with the structure of the frame render, which is actually really convoluted, and it's like a depth first search that hammers the stencil buffer, and it's really fiddly. And I'm possibly going to add in a bunch of ray tracing as well and stuff like that. That'll be cool. So that's sort of the algorithm by which the frame is drawn. The draw manager is going to be more concerned with firing the actual draw calls off to say, hey, draw this, draw that, and draw the next thing. Render room is just a little thing to say, I don't know if it even needs to be a class, but it's just a logical unit to say, hey, render this room with these parameters, because there's 8 rooms and you're going to render them a couple hundred times each, maybe. Maybe. Like, you can render them a lot of times. I don't know exactly how many, but it can be a significant number. Especially when you count in like mirrors and reflections and all this stuff, it can get pretty complex. And similarly, model is something that just loads up a model, which is going to get replaced with ASIMP. I looked into ASIMP, which is an open asset import library, or something like ASIMP, but I did not look into it sufficiently to actually replace. It kind of, actually, ASIMP sort of gives you something that's very similar to this. I don't know if it combines these triangles or not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? So rendering engine is going to be like, here's a draw manager. Now render the room using this draw manager. So it's going to set the draw manager up with the right stencil buffer settings before calling rendering the room. And all that jazz. So my one remaining question is, how do I get a vertex buffer and the bucket of all this nonsense? Which, all this, that probably seems to work. It's an extremely basic class, but it might do the trick. I think I maybe need to make it a little bit more sensible. Maybe it should hold on to the links to the meshes and be able to rebuild itself. Like you give it a pointer to a mesh, it gives you a pointer to a state thing or something. I could use shared pointers, but also I could not. So let's just, I'm one thing I like to do, which is sort of nonsense, but a laugh anyway, is just open up a gedit or Notepad and start typing stuff, see if anything amazing happens. So I want a vertex array, which in OpenGL just to clarify, is this thing that lets you tells OpenGL how to read a stream of vertices. Basically, it's the code end of this. So that's cool. There's going to be a vertex array. So there's going to be a big old bucket of static geometry. There's going to be a vertex array which is going to point into that bucket. There we go. And we're going to need to bind that, or we need to call draw manager. Something's underneath the floorboards. Actually, I think I know what that is. There's underfloor heating. I think it's because the weather is colder, the underfloor heating is making something expand slightly, and it's just like very, very slightly. It's just causing some pipes to stretch just a little bit, or something like that. Maybe that's not good. Draw manager. Draw manager is gonna say, it's almost like what's all the information it needs to draw. It needs to know what program you're on, which could be just called beforehand, start this program. It needs to know what vertex array you want to draw from. Textures and stuff, again, maybe the textures and uniforms maybe get set beforehand. So the real point of doing this through a class is because I want to cut down on sharing this stuff in bizarre ways. And the element numbers, which is fine. So that's all fine. So the textures, uniforms. What uniforms do I even have for this? Just the camera and the texture. Okay, there'll probably be others. This could be shading and lighting and stuff. Excuse me, where is that? There it is. I don't want to rebind textures that are already bound, although I'm sure that doesn't make a difference. But I also don't want to. I want to allocate them in a way that encourages maximal sharing. So, gosh, there's a problem, and that's that I always do this at like midnight. And that's a bad time to do it. So I guess Draw Manager should just have all the textures and be like, hey, cool. Put this texture here. Uniforms. It should probably know about the uniforms as well. Well, the texture implies a uniform. Okay, so yeah, it should know about all the textures, and then you bind textures in. That's not a problem. So what if the static geometry was done differently and that everything had its own vertex array? Well, which it probably will be for dynamic stuff. It'll probably all be on its own vertex array. Like each dynamic model, like the player, or if I've got like some like potted plant that sways, or some banner that wobbles, or you know, stuff that's bones or materials or animations or something, will probably. I mean, they could all go in one big vertex array. I'm not sure that would help. So how would that work? Let's take a drink of water. That's a stalling technique. So let's imagine here, this is all done. We've drawn all the static messages, now we want to draw the dynamic messages. So we're going to have something like that. Yeah, I know, that's pseudocode, you don't need to correct it, it's obviously wrong. Then ideally this should just know. It would need to have a UBO of bone weight. Is that even a UBO? Or because UBOs have to have like a fixed size, don't they? It would be like shader storage or whatever the 3.3 version of shader storage is. They sound the same. Other uniforms bind a vertex array. It's not the bone weights, it's the bone positions or whatever. Vertex array, and then the bone weights are in the vertex attributes. So it's fundamentally the same, but where would these come from? I guess there would be some, not necessarily draw manager, there would be like a dynamic model cache which could pull out the specific models that it was working with. So, using that logic, I should make a static model cache. Maybe the rooms and the models should be in different vertex arrays. It seems like it would be a lot easier. But it's going to be mostly static geometry, and I really want to not have to... So rebinding a vertex array. Oh, this is pretty dated. Render target, yeah, we're not going to change render target. Programs, 300k a second. Ugh. So at 60 frames a second, you can do 5,000 program changes. And if we need at least 2 for a room, that's like 2,500 rooms. Adds a hard limit. But this is a little bit dated. But then again, a lot of people have computers that are a few years old. And anyway, these specific numbers aren't super important. It's just like what is how you should optimize. Vertex bindings. The heckadoodles is vertex bindings? Vertex bindings and vertex format are actually both handled by vertex. Sorry, so they're, you know, actually not that. I'm possibly over optimizing for static geometry. Seeing as I would probably need to change textures for each one anyway. As I would need to change textures for each one anyway. Well, we could just put all the textures in one big array. Keep the texture size standardized. Then I wouldn't need to change texture bindings. Make lighting done in one 64 by 64 by 64 cube. What's ROP? Render output unit. Wait, render output unit? Render output. Raster operations pipeline. Well, Wikipedia certainly says a bunch of stuff about what it is, but it doesn't really clarify much. Oh, is this... Are you drawing to multiple... No, that's render targets. Is that to do with anti-aliasing? I don't know. Not sure. Maybe I should stop overthinking everything. But then again, the reason I'm redesigning this entire thing from the ground up is because I got stuck in too many dead ends, because I underthought stuff because it was a complicated project, and I was unable to make further progress. Well, it's possible. Well, okay. I did spend that time making that bucket thing. And maybe I'm getting at what's it called when, not buyer's remorse, sunken cost fallacy. And now I want everything to be in a big bucket, but maybe that isn't a big optimization. Or maybe it is. I haven't even bottlenecked it. Let's just put the bucket aside. It's still a perfectly valid class. And I'm sure we love it very dearly. I feel like the floor shouldn't creak that much. Okay, let's just say, hey, who cares about that? Let's take these programs out. Prepare the room. Very nice. So we always set the uniforms and set texture. Textures definitely need to be removed. So removing the program was one thing. But that also removes the uniforms are tied to the program. So just to show, here's my program. I load it up, but the uniforms, I can get them from the program. Ideally, you don't want to get them every frame, but you really can. It's not a big deal. I guess it does like a string match. I don't know. Well, you should just get them once. They don't change. So what I could do is just hack some stuff together. Like, whoa. Now this would probably still work apart from, well, first of all, it doesn't compile that. Okay, I'm going to start putting init functions on render stuff because my life is spiraling out of control. Because it's rather than everything having like a check, oh, is it initialized every frame? Hey, not initialized. Well, we can initialize that. So that's fine. We'll just init that. Bish bash bosh, that's all good. Let's just take this out for now with some comments, I know. And then we just need to init the rendering engine, and we should have something that does the same as it always has, because there's an init function there, but we don't render it in it. Okay, there we go. Boom. What is this? So, is there a oh yeah. Okay, there we go. I put semicolon on that. Oh, it didn't catch it. And that is still not in the make file, so let's just add it in. So this should still do what it has always done. Wow, but I didn't do it correct. So it's wrong. And it says it was a problem here. Because this program is not the right program, I can't just do that. Okay, so I need to probably be sensible. So how can I do like a set uniform? Oh, I feel like the start function should probably have all this. In a way of identifying the uniforms, which probably means each. Right, see, because this is kind of nonsense. I'm going to add a bunch of different shaders at some point. For now, though, it's just the one because I'm boring. So that's fine. It's almost like I need a little struct with the different uniforms in it. Like almost like static. But let's just not do that. Well, there's only 2 uniforms and one. No, there's only one uniform. There's only one uniform. So set the only uniform, and when we have many uniforms, then we can get confused about it. But what I was just thinking in my head is like some kind of like context for structs that's, or it wouldn't necessarily be, but like a static struct that's for each different shader being a different type with some like uniform like camera and whatever and some textures which are actually then assigned as these things when it initializes, and then you can also feed them in as variables and it will know what to do with them. Probably it doesn't actually need any real checking because it just needs to be set up correctly. There's only one uniform. Lol. That's a good comment. Okay, so then see, actually that's kind of nice because that moves GLM's type pointer rubbish here. Then I can also set texture. Oh, what is the texture when it's at home? It's like a. It's a GLUN, isn't it? Okay, this is very silly, but that's not the point. Actually, the draw manager should probably have all the textures anyway. It takes the index. That's right. It's going to set to index. That's cool. Okay, whatever. Oh, I never actually set the stuff. Set the only uniform to camera, which I feel like should need to be multiplied through by the basis, but whatever. It's not. 0 to M texture. I wonder if this will work. Oh, goshy gumdrops. It did. Well, that's nice. So now we can get rid of the program from here and these. This is starting to shrink. That's good. What's the mesh? Is a static geometry vertex. So we can take out this mesh as well. I'm starting to delete code. That's actually a good thing. Oh, I've broken it completely. Oh, look at that. Cool. Will I even need that bucket thing? Maybe. I would still like to put all the static geometry into one big bucket. So I really want the init to just build all the programs, pull out all the uniforms, and then when you set the uniform, you would just give it the uniform number and type, which could be fine, right? That should be no problem. Put some init functions on these. I'm just getting, they're all over the place now. Everything is init. And that's not my fault. That is because you cannot just spam you cannot spam. You just cannot spam. You should not spam draw OpenGL draw command, or not draw, just any OpenGL commands unless you have an active OpenGL context, and a constructor is a really terrible place to do that because that, well, it just is. It's nicer in a function because then you can be like, hey, I can call that function specifically whenever I want. It's my function and I'm the boss. So in fact these would not need to be unique pointers, although deallocating them is also equally important to do during a context. Well, I can actually just... No, I don't want to do that there. Is that actually going to be... That's going to be horribly unsafe. Let's just not do any of what I just did. I'm trying to not make them pointers because that's fiddly. But there's more problems with not making them pointers than there is making them pointers. I should maybe just live up to my family name and make them an array of 8 rooms and say, hey, I've just hardwired tons of stuff already. Yeah, why not? I'm never going to do like weird shapes. I thought about weird shapes and that actually made me annoyed. Let's sort this out a little bit. This is just mostly just hacking. Okay, bang, there we go. We'll in it with a room. And that can do that. That can do that. That can do that. Doesn't need anything. There. There, it's nice and boring now. I've made it boring. You don't need it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Render rooms, N, init, to world rooms, which is also anyway an array. I'm trying to not make this an array when the world already has it as an array. Okay, and then it's all like, what are you doing, you maniac? And it wants a pointer to that, and I'm like, cool, you can have a pointer. And now it's all like, what are you doing? None of these things are pointers. Why do you think they are? Have you gone silly? And I'm like, yeah, a little bit. Okay, only a couple times. So room render actually, well, it's got this mesh stuff which I kind of don't want, but what it really should be doing is going through all the things in the game and gathering them into a bucket and saying, hey, this stuff is going to get rendered when I render the room. So I really shouldn't, I don't really care about all this stuff. And certainly the textures need to vamoosh. I really want to tie the buffers and the vertex array together. So what I had here with this bucket thing is kind of cute, but not really. It's cool, but another day. So all this would go, textures would be somewhere else. They would be in the draw manager because they need to be shared between things. Each thing having its own texture is silly. Building the mesh for the room is fine. Binding it into the thing would go. Yeah, so that would be. That would really. So I'm just trying to pull out all the stuff from here. It was a big class full of hacks, and it's very tricky to pull it apart. And then the prepare function not only would build the mesh, which also I'm probably going to farm out to another piece of code, but then would loop through all the contents of the room. Ugh, my scar is itchy. I have a scar because I was in a bicycle accident a few weeks ago. I can at least be a villain. It's close to my eye. It's not properly like over the eye. That would be, well, probably indicative of a much worse accident, because I'm glad my vision was not impaired by that. You know. Anyway, so once it's done, it's tidied up the mesh for the room. So if that is dirty, it would tidy up the mesh. Then it would look at all the objects in the room, find out how they are rendered, pull out the right things for each of them, matrices, make sure they're up to date, and they have a list of commands saying, hey, here's how to render each of these. And then when it says render it, it's like, cool, start this one, set up the things, render the room, bash, that's done. Now go through each object, start up the things. They're already sorted in the right order. And then, you know, bash, bash, bash. They're all done too. Cool. That's the room rendered. So, right, okay. I'm going to do some template experimentation. Let's make a new directory. What do I call a thing that's got all the shader and the uniforms and all the everything together? I'm just Googling for a word to use. I think the standard traditional word is pipeline. Why am I looking at German Wikipedia? So what is a graphics pipeline? I should probably know the answer to that, but you know, hey. Yeah, I don't know if pipeline is the right word. Render, shader, pipeline, program. Give me some more words, Google. Yeah, it's definitely like these are certainly called pipelines. Do I want to make a directory? Yes, but once again I only have one shader. So let's not make a mesh. I'm just going to make more and more and more files. I can sort them out once I see the patterns in how they are grouped together. It's late, but I'm doing quite good right now. I'm getting some stuff done, so let's push onwards. So what I wanted to do here was make so I just call it static mesh. I already have a thing called mesh. The naming here is getting worse and worse as I go on, but that's to be expected. Static mesh. So what was it? I was thinking of. I'm in the CPP file for this. So I was just thinking. It could be in its own pipeline namespace, but like a struct called static mesh, and then see instantly a flash of inspiration. That namespace vertex static geometry. How did I only copy that out of there? I don't know. There we go. Bash. Bish bash bosh. And other heartwarming things to say. Bingo bongo. Okay. Also, let's call it static geometry because that's what I called it before. Static mesh is now going to be static geometry, and now it's gonna be like, oh, you just got rid of the file. Yeah, close it. I don't want that file anymore. It lasted like 2 minutes. So yeah, we've got the vertexes in there. Yes. I have these uniforms. What actually are they? I think they're, yeah, this is a type diff. But I do like to use them because it's very clear. So uniform for the camera. The uniform for texture. I don't know what file I'm looking for. This one. So I flip between files quite a lot, and that must be obnoxious. So if this was really setting the texture that it cared about, that's the texture and that's the index, but this is the uniform that it would go into. And that's fine. And then here's what I'm thinking, static geometry. Or I could just make everything in there static, but that seems nonsense-ish. Okay. So I probably need a CPP file for it because it's static. And what I'm going to do is stick these in a subfolder. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I just did the wrong thing. No harm done. Did I actually... Oh no, I made a horrible file. That is cursed. Let's try that one more time. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going for there. How do you make static? I don't make static variables very often, like globals. Because they're silly. How do you actually do that? Oh, you're supposed to do... can you do inline static? Yeah, this is wrong because then... it doesn't need to be static. Is that gonna work? I don't think that's right. I'd never make global variables. I'm like, what do I do? If that is right, I don't actually need a CPP file, but I do because I want to have a function that will bind these vertexes into a thing. So then what I want the draw managers to do is include... these are going to go in their own thing. This isn't really going how I imagined it. And in fact, this is terrible because it's using global variables, which doesn't even make sense because you can have more than one of these rendering engines. I didn't really want to go down the line of having a... let's just get rid of it. The global doesn't make sense. I just wanted some stuff there so you could have a type. But you can't really, that's a pointer to a member function. Yeah, I don't know. What I was thinking with the global was that if I use the right type, then I can identify things, but it doesn't really make sense. I still feel I need to break this into even more bits and pieces, and then maybe I can combine some. I guess it's currently like a jigsaw puzzle with all the pieces just sort of hammered together into one piece of rubbish. Alright, I want to make a thing that combines buffers and the vertex array, vertex attrib array and all that. Because then I can get rid of a lot more code from this class so that it can do things that are less interesting or more interesting. Oh, what if this just had a bunch of different things? No, that's silly. Yeah. I need to think a bit more about some sort of template silliness. I think you should be able to do it so that you can just say, hey, this is the type of the draw that's going to happen, and here is that type has some other types, and which implies what uniforms or texture uniforms or whatever it's going to bind in, and then you bind in the right ones, and it should be fine. I'm probably going to end up like only adding 3 shaders, and this will all be silly, but it's a fun little experiment nonetheless. Now, the next step, I say with completely fake clarity, is something that combines the buffers and the attrib array, which is kind of what the bucket-y thing does, but I don't want to do that. It's going to be a couple of buffers, a vertex buffer, an index buffer, and a vertex array object, a VAO, vertex attrib settings. What would that be called? I could just put like Kevin or something down. Naming stuff is difficult. Let's call it vertex buffer. No, it's because that's part of it is vertex buffer. Buffery array. That was a typo. I was going to put buffer array, but buffery array. Yeah, I mean that's just a terrible portmanteau, but whatever. Once again, whoops, my mouse is also as broken as my keyboard. Names are difficult, but it also completely don't really matter. You can call them things, whatever you want, and if they happen to work, that's great. You can rename them later, it's fine. Let's make a buffery array, and really this is just going to pull out 3 things from this one. It's going to pull out this stuff, and I want to put it in this order. Buffer is going to be called vertex buffer, element buffer is going to be called index buffer. It doesn't know what these are, so I'm going to include the OpenGL wrapper that I wrote. One init function. Yeah, it needs return type. Who would have guessed? I don't know why I didn't type that. Well, that's creepy. I just heard like something outside. Maybe a fox or a chicken or something. Oh, let's just make this a struct. Because then I can remove that. Let's just get rid of this stuff. No. I just deleted something that I probably needed. So let's just put it straight back. I didn't even get it from the project, so it's still there. No, not bucket. This is going to do something very similar to bucket, which also I might delete because it's not being used. And I've just got bored of the idea. Oh no. That's actually probably going to be a template. So I don't need to see. Well, let's just... Okay. Bucket did kind of the same thing with a template. So let's just copy paste that and see what we can do. So we're going to fill this buffer array with this mesh. And that should be possible even though we don't know what the type of the vertex of the mesh is. Crikey, you're saying, okay. Now someone is messaging me. See, I told you I heard a weird noise. Yeah, I might need to go because there's some sounds. Oh, it's my kiddo. He's awake inside. I need to go. I wasn't quite finished. And greetings. I'm saying buffer a lot. But it is sadly time for me to pack this in because I have family responsibilities. So, cutting it short, I will resume from this very point another time. Okay, bye.